अस्सलामु अलैकुम वरहमतुल्लाहि वबरकातुहू। नहमदुहु व नुसल्ली अला रसूलिल करीम, अम्मा बाद, फ़अऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम, बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। रब्बि इश्रह ली सदरी व यस्सिर ली अमरी वहलुल उक़दतम मिन लिसानी यफ़क़हू क़ौली। Dawai Shafi, this is a topic that is with a strong background, where a person came to Imam Qayyim ibn al-Jawzi talking about his heartbreak and how he's guiding him. And in these times we are loaded with challenges like that. But irony is that we don't know how to handle those situations, and this is one book which gives us very important guideline on that. So today inshallah we'll be covering chapter number 34 to 47. As I told you earlier, this is a book with 114 chapters. So now that we have talked about sinning and different aspects related to how people sin, what are the impacts of sin on a person, now we move on to understand it's time to halt on sins, because the loss with sinning is beyond our comprehension. It's like that domino effect. You make a small mistake, a small sin, a minor sin, and you're like, what difference would it make? There are people who are bigger sinners than this. मैंने तो ये छोटा सा काम किया है. I just messed in this one area a little bit. What we do not understand is the dominoes effect even a small sin creates, and we end up ultimately from a small to a bigger sin. And this happens a lot in haram relationship as well. Like people, when they indulge in something haram, it's like just one click. It's just like we are friends, just sharing notes, having a cup of coffee or tea with someone, or just looking at someone. What's wrong with that? I'm not doing anything or not interacting with guys with this intention. And one day you find out, oh no, this intention was never there, but it just happened. And then you move on to bigger issues and challenges. So that is why we find out, like in Surah Shura, verse number 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُو عَن كَثِيرٍ. Whatever misfortune happens to you is because on the things your hands have wrought. And for many of them, He grants forgiveness. Like we call upon ourselves all these challenges. We earned it. That was my own click. That was my own smile. That was my own second look. That was my own way of dealing with that situation. So I ended up in that mess. So that is why it is very, very important that we work on ourselves. Like in Surah Al-Anfal, verse number 53, it has been elaborated, because Allah will never change the grace which He has bestowed on people until they change what is in their own souls. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And verily Allah is He who hears and knows all things. So basically, we have to work on how we are perceiving things. Are we indulging into something which is sinful? We can't just say, Allah ne mere saath aise kyun kiya? Why this happened to me? We have to roll back and see how I got engaged in a certain sin. Like Ali bin Abi Talib Raziyallahu anhu said, no affliction comes down except due to sin, and it is not removed except with repentance. So basically, when sins happen, we get into more trouble. And yes, there is always a way out of those sins. How? By repentance. So how do we come out of that? Imam Qayyim ibn al-Jawzi brings up an example of a strong fort. By just merely looking at this picture, what kind of feeling do you get? Yes, strength, calmness, importance. Like all these things are associated when you look at a strong building. Imam Qayyim ibn al-Jawzi says, when we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the same feeling of being in a strong fortress. So when you submit to Him, you will have this feeling of security. You will have this feeling of protection. You will be able to get a royal feeling, feel important, feel calm, have the strength. And we can go on and on relating to the feeling in a fort. You know, a lot of time when people say, I tried to submit, but I wasn't able to cope with it. Why? Because we don't fully submit. And we don't give ourselves time to stabilize, and we go back into that same sinful zone. A disobedient person has more fear of people and society. That is why you end up with anxiety. There is a lot of restlessness. There is isolation in the heart. There is bitterness in life. And you have remoteness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will often come across people like that who will be anxious, who will say that, why this happened in my life? There are so many crises. And they will say that I don't feel any connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is because they have been into a lot of disobedience and not submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what basically happens to such people is that they cannot differentiate between right and wrong. They cannot understand what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, they always end up making wrong decisions. There will be sickness in the heart, and sins are basically the ailments of the heart. They are like coronavirus for your heart. And there is no cure but to give up sins. Like, you have to protect yourself against sins. And that is why we find out, like in Surah Al-Infitar, verse number 13 and 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Innal abrara lafi na'im. And for the righteous, they will be in bliss. Wa innal fujjara lafi jahim. And the wicked, they will be in fire. So we make these choices ourselves. And when we make these choices, we have to live by these choices. When your heart is physically sick, so you have to perform an open heart surgery. So similarly, when your heart gets sick by sinning, you have to open up that heart spiritually and feel that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't let that sick heart be a hindrance between your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the big challenge we have trying to deal with such people who have been hit badly by sins, then have been in a wrong haram relationship, they're making struggles to survive either in that relationship or for their mental health, or trying to revive their broken heart. That's a big gap because there are so many sins there. So what we need to do is help them develop that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why Imam Qayyim Ibn Jawzi begins with the concept of dua. It's time to help those people have some connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because sins are going to pull you down. It will be such a suffocating feeling, as if you are banging against such a strong wall and there is no solution for you. That is why such people, they go into deep depression and they also go towards taking up their lives. But what we want to teach them is how to be happy, content in life by having a strong connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look at torture of any worldly love, what is that? First of all, there is struggle to gain that love. Then there is insecurity for retaining that love. And then finally, there will be loss of that love. This is one reality we have to face. And we can apply it on, even material things. For example, you want a smartphone. What kind of struggle? And you are totally in love with that particular smartphone or a laptop that you want to have or any other gadget that you want to have. So what is your struggle in gaining that love, that gadget? Obviously, you have to save money, or you have to convince your parents, and you have to live by certain rules. Then once you have it, you are insecure, despite you have it. Why? You have to safeguard it with passwords, keep it safe otherwise, use it properly, not be casual about it. And ultimately, a time would come when it will be totally obsolete. It won't work that way. You'll move on for struggle of another new love. We can apply this formula to even halal love in our life. Let's say you love your parents. So what struggles you have to make to gain that love of your parents? Obviously, you have to show that love. You have to listen to them. Sometimes you don't want to do a certain thing, but you make sacrifices to prove to your parents that you love them. Okay, you have your parents' love, but you still stay insecure. And many times what the kids do is they keep making comparison between them and their siblings. Do you love me more, or you love my brother or sister more? Or making a comparison otherwise. And finally, there will always be a loss. I mean, many of us are going to definitely see our parents dying in our lifetime. So there will be loss of that love. It will be in our heart, but physically we won't have them with us. And that holds true for even like when you have halal love, like you get married and the struggles you have to make to gain that love, how you have to adjust, make compromises to develop understanding with your husband to gain his love. Then there are so many insecurities from mother-in-law, rest of in-laws, then his office colleagues, then you keep watch on whom he's chatting with, how are his interaction with the opposite gender. But ultimately, again, you will lose that love one way or the other through death. Sometimes they move on, they want to have another wife. There are sometimes cases of domestic abuse, there's separation, there's divorce. So one thing or the other will definitely happen. So basically, Imam Qayyim Ibn Jawzi wants us to live with this reality check in our life. Whenever we just have love for the worldly stuff, tangible, intangible, we have to understand there will always be torture involved, and ultimately with the struggle with insecurity, there will be loss. Having said that doesn't mean that we don't love our parents, we don't love our husband, we don't love sometimes the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. But we love everything with a reality check, remembering that one day there will be a loss. And that is why over here we talk about our destination to be barzakh. If we look at a life after death and the names that have been given to them, it's like Alamul Faraq. This is a time of separation. When you die, you are forth, you're moving to another world. There is hijab, Alamul Hijab. There is Hasrat. And this is a time of Hasra. So all these names have been given when we reach that destination of barzakh, because we will be separated from all the loves. No matter how much we love, we will not be with them at that time. So basically, we need to, in this life, make wiser choices. How do you do that? Whenever you make a choice, you look forward. You ask yourself, what is going to be the impact of this love, this engagement, this interaction 10 years from now, 20 years from now, in a very realistic manner. Then when I die, then on the day of judgment, rather than living in this fantasy world, oh, everything is going to work out. Then you have to be happy with the wiser choice. Wiser choice will always give you happiness. And sometimes girls, they say, oh, yes, I am in love with this guy and I'm happy. But no, you're not. You're crying when you're not together. You're crying when you're together. Then when you're separated for some reason, again, you're not happy. Then you have to hide this happiness, the so-called happiness, from so many people. So it's not a universal kind of happiness or not a wiser choice that you made. Then we always have to remember how we're going to explain this thing at the time when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then is this choice that I'm making giving me contentment? What kind of rewards will come my way when I make this choice? So as I said, you can't live in a fantasy world. You have to have some logistics or some factual figures straightened out so that you can be sure of whatever you have done. So basically, what we have to understand over here is we need to value ourselves on our default. If the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us, the way we need to work, the way we need to acknowledge ourselves, how to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Imam Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, saw signs of remarkable knowledge in Imam Shafi'i, he told him, I see that Allah has cast a light upon you, so do not extinguish it with the darkness of disobedience to Him. So this is very important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us so many potentials, and it is important that we safeguard those potentials. So in our last session, we talked about ghaira, we talked about haya. Now Imam Qayyim Ibn Jawzi talks about nafs. How there can be disgrace of the self if we don't understand it properly. Like in Surah Shams says, قَدْ أَفْلَهَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He has succeeded who purifies it. The one who does tazkiyah, always working on himself, always working on self-purification, improvement, will benefit, will succeed. And he has failed who instills it or does what? He corrupts it. So we need to like work on ourselves properly. So it's like, there is a devil and who's constantly after us. We need to understand our desires. We need to fix our temptations. We need to have petty issue control, and then we need to have a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for each one of us, it is important to see what are my desires, what thing appeals to me, how I get distracted or derailed, how I end up sinning. And then you need to learn how to fix your temptations. One of the parental skill you all need to have is how to say no as a parent to your child's wants. Because when you don't say no to them, that's where the mess starts. So I ask them this one question: are you able to say no, not just for parental need, but for your own self, on something that your inside is saying no, but someone who's standing in front of you, you have to actually say no to that person. And do you know 100% of the families who were there were about 30 people, they all said no, we can't say no to even a kid, even some of the relatives, for customs, for rituals, for whatever the demands people put up in front of us. It is so difficult to say no. So that is what fixing temptation is about. We need to learn to say no to ourselves. Okay, yes, I'm on a diet plan and there is a fudge cake in front of me, but right now I can't eat it. No, I won't eat it. Okay? I'm so lazy today, I feel like sleeping. I listen to the recording of the lecture later on, the session later on. Even if I miss something, it doesn't make any difference. No, this is my temptation to be in my bed. I have to get up. I can take a nap later. So fixing your temptations here and there will definitely help you say no in very alarming situation. And then petty issue control has to be there in our life. Like, I'm feeling bad. I had a fight with my mom, with my brother, sister. So I opened up my laptop. I'm sitting over there. Somebody just randomly appeared on the chat box and I started chatting because I was so upset and my self-esteem was so low and I needed some entertainment. And there it goes. So these kind of decisions we can't take. What we need to do is work on our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When there is distance from Allah, what actually happens? You are careless, you're negligent, then there comes a serious sin, then there is innovation in deen. Oh, Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, or I just make this wazifa and things will start happening for me. Then there is hypocrisy, and ultimately you move towards shirk. So losing one's status before Allah and before His creation, there is life of disgrace, worry and sadness. And we also need to remember the imprints we leave behind. Like in Surah Ash-Shura, verse number 84, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. Grant me the honorable mention on the tongue of truth among the latest generations. You had been in college and university and school, and when people remember you, they're like, oh, the one who was running an affair with someone, so and so. Or the one, who used to go out, bunk classes, and do the certain activity. Oh yes, I remember she mentioned watching certain thing on a YouTube or Netflix, which was not appropriate, but she recommended me, I didn't watch it. So these are like things we need to remember what imprints we are leaving behind. And what we find out about the Prophet ﷺ in Surah Alam Nashrah, verse number 4 is, وَرَفَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ, and we raised high the esteem of you. And this is so beautiful. Like, when you are very staunch in your religious practices, you have submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people remember you like that. Wherever you go, they're like, mashallah, she practices something which is according to those principles. Well, they might say on your face, you're too rigid, you don't have any fun, but they do appreciate ultimately what you are engaged in. So we need to see for ourselves what titles we want to receive. The title of a believer, dutiful person, reverent, pious, obedient, truthful, responsible, or disobedient, or opponent, insolent, corrupt, evil, cursed, adulterer, killer, thief, liar, traitor, homosexual, troublemaker. This choice is ours. We make that choice for ourselves. And when sometimes people cry like saying, okay, somebody just talking behind my back, I never did something. Well, as it says, where there is smoke, there is fire. So you definitely did something, even if you didn't go through the whole mess. but you definitely engage yourself into something wrong, and that is why you're getting this name.